The speed.
Helmet can't chase him down.
The power.
Look at that stiff arm.
The intensity.
Game.
It's like no other sport.
Touchdown.
Every ounce of preparation to achieve that extra edge.
Caught. This is just insane.
It's that same relentless pursuit of perfection that's helping fuel a revolution off the field to improve player health and safety with cutting-edge technological advancements.
Set the tone, let's go.
A revolution that is being driven by data. More of it than ever before is collected to better help the NFL understand exactly how injuries are happening on field.
Let's just keep going.
It's a commitment that we're going to do everything to make sure our players are safer, that we make our game safer, and that we actually lead in innovation.
Y'all know what we playing for today, man. So let's go get it, man.
Innovation is at the core of everything the NFL does to make the game safer. Through its engineering roadmap and other health and safety initiatives, the NFL has committed tens of millions of dollars in both the lab and on the field, in stadiums and on players, to gain deeper insights into player injuries that are improving protective equipment, driving safety-related rule changes, and informing coaching and training.
Didn't I tell you it's hard to block me?
The engineering roadmap was a large-scale investment made by the league to better understand concussions on field and head injuries more generally as experienced by NFL players. And so we hired a number of biomechanical engineers, experts in the field who came from the automobile industry, understanding injury biomechanics. And we asked them, what can we do with the information that we have here to analyze and better understand what's happening on field, and then hopefully begin to prevent it? And one of the primary goals that came out of the engineering roadmap has been ways to transform the helmet industry to build equipment that better protects players.
The NFL has recruited engineering experts like Dr. Jeff Crandall from Virginia-based BioCore to help guide the work.
Automobile safety has been one of the most successful injury prevention initiatives worldwide. Literally millions of lives saved. A lot of these sort of approaches, technology, crash test dummies, crash testing that have been used in automobile safety, we said, well, how can this be applied to the NFL environment, and how can we prevent injuries in the NFL?
Let's go!
What's different about that approach and translating it to field is in a car crash, you don't have video. We have video of every injury. If we can take those injuries on field, like a concussion, and with the forces and the impact, we can build that in laboratories. So that has truly advanced the way in which helmets are now designed, manufactured, and then how they translate to field.
Today's football helmets are products of engineering and design that can take years to innovate, test, optimize, and manufacture. Dr. Crandall's team built a scientific model to test a helmet's performance that opened the floodgates for innovation and improvement in the helmet industry. The rate of innovation today is 9 times what it was before the league started testing helmets.
We develop a performance score, which is based on 15 tests, 5 different locations, 3 different speeds that have all been identified for what happens on field. We put it on a crash test dummy. We measure through sensors in the head what the accelerations of the head are. And we give what's called a helmet performance score, which relates to how well that helmet can actually manage the forces and motions of impact.
Good pass, dog. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Once we have that helmet performance score, we put those on the poster. We rank them from top to the bottom, so the best performing have the best helmet performance score.
When I am fitting a helmet and talking helmets with players, I do recommend what the safest are. I do reference this poster. We do have the darkest green, which are the safest, the lightest green, which is the next best, and then the yellow.
We've done this for many years now, and so our predictions of how helmets are going to perform in a lab has actually panned out on the laboratory. And so we hear things from players that I trust the science, which makes us happy.
You put facts in front of them, and they come to us for recommendations and for advice, and with the backing of this data, they are really starting to listen and turn.
Hey, let's be smart. Let's put this game away. Let's be smart.
The NFL is not only testing existing helmets, but they are also incentivizing entrepreneurs, small businesses, and universities to develop better protective equipment, including helmets through its series of head health tech crowdsourcing challenges, which have granted over $4.5 million since 2017 to advance 17 new technologies for use in the NFL, including its most recent and largest challenge yet, the NFL Helmet Challenge.
This is really about the innovators and making sure that we're engaging with the best and the brightest to make our game safer for the next generation of players. One way to improve innovation even further is to bring in new competitors, new entrepreneurs, new ideas from different sectors of the world. For example, new engineers, people from the aerospace industry, maybe from the military, or others who have different ideas from the incumbent helmet manufacturers. So what we chose to do was to put out a pretty substantial prize, see if people had new ideas that they could bring into the fold, and outperform the currently best performing helmets.
Teams submitted their helmets for testing after 2 years of research and development. The NFL awarded 3 teams nearly $1.6 million in grant funding to continue to advance their innovations. The first awardee, Collide, is based in Montreal. The team came from the medical device industry and had never manufactured a helmet before.
The prototype that we have produced, it really looks like a standard helmet, but what is interesting is the liner that is inside. It's made of 3D printed pads with a mesh structure, and we were able to calibrate this mesh so it can absorb and redirect the energy, so hopefully it can better protect the players. Our helmet is made of 95 different pads with mesh inside, and each pad is different. Each mesh is like optimized to absorb the different type of impact that a player can receive during the game. So as you can see, the helmet looks pretty standard for a football helmet, but we really worked on the different aspects so it behaves the best during an impact. So we worked on the shell. This one is a demo shell, but our shell can deform quite a lot so it can distribute the impact on most of the liner. They are hanging on a sling, kind of a net, so it gives some flexibility and it can really be conformable during an impact. We were super excited being recognized by the NFL. I think it shows that the technology that we have developed has some potential to be worn by players, and also the NFL trusts us that we can bring this prototype even further in the next year.
The second awardee, Impressio, is based in Denver, Colorado, that was no stranger to the NFL, having won previous innovation challenges for their revolutionary energy-absorbing material.
I'd always thought inside the body, could I use it to dissipate shocks and impacts in joints? But then I thought, well, all the same concepts, maybe principles should apply. Turns out a helmet, it's a system of components. It's a pretty difficult one to solve, but it really kind of got us started and got us down that pathway to say, we have a great kind of shock and impact dissipator. Why don't we try to use it for head protection?
So here is an example of our NFL Helmet Challenge prototype submission. You can see it looks like a pretty normal helmet, and then our main focus was changing the insides. So if I pull this back, we can kind of see the lattice structure. We have these buckling columns, which their whole goal is to buckle in the impact, and then next is the LCE inside. They will absorb the energy as well. And we can mold these into different sizes and different shapes. And this is the material that's inside the 3D printed liner that is helping with the energy dissipation. So the two are working in a system to help reduce the severity of the impact.
None of the materials that we put on the inside are used in a traditional or commercially available helmet right now. These are just brand new materials that have never been used before.
The third Helmet Challenge awardee, Zenith, was the only current helmet manufacturer that received funding for their design. The team brought in new partners and aimed to build upon the Zenith helmets worn by NFL players today.
The ability to work with the NFL for over a decade has been great for Zenith. It allows us to get into the locker rooms, talk to players, understand what their needs and wants are from any type of equipment that might go on the field. Team Zenith's helmet prototype, starting from the outside of the shell in, we have a variable stiffness shell, which allows it to perform soft in some areas under impact and firmer in other areas. Moving inward, the variable stiffness shell is complemented by the Rheon Labs material.
When we got the chance to partner with Zenith and actually go for the Head Health Challenge Award, we jumped at the chance. And what we've done here is we've got a material that behaves very differently, soft and flexible at low speeds, and then they stiffen up for medium speed impact, and they stiffen up even more for high speed impact.
The second technology on the inside of the helmet shell is really the lattice that we've developed. This lattice structure, as you can tell, is very porous. It's also been designed for supreme comfort. The combination of all of these different technologies really allow the helmet to perform supremely well as a system and provides optimal comfort for that on-field experience.
Collecting and analyzing data to inform helmet design is just one part of the NFL's engineering roadmap. Another big way the NFL uses this data is to guide rule changes.
I've been on the competition committee a long time, and I think one of the things I learned early on in the committee was don't ever be afraid of change, and don't ever be afraid of innovation. If it's in the name of player health and safety, the game will adjust, the coaches will adjust, the fans will adjust, and the game will still be great.
It's too easy.
Football is a tough sport and played at full speed, but we should be in the business of when we're given data and given information that there's an unreasonable risk of injury that we can fix by rule, we should do it.
We're collecting all of this information on field, taking a look at what happens when athletes get hurt. And if you examine enough of them, you begin to see patterns. You begin to pick up trends that you might not otherwise see if you only look at one individual circumstance at a time. So the aggregation of those different data points and aggregation of those different incidents on field is going to lead a trained observer to reach some conclusions. You can share that, both the data as well as the insights, with people who make the rules changes. And we've talked to the competition committee about this on an annual basis, and in fact much more frequently than that, to say, hey, these sorts of behaviors are leading to these sorts of results, or this set of rules has a higher incidence of this sort of injury.
Glad you're with us, and here we go.
One of the opportunities we saw is with kickoffs. We looked at kickoffs a number of years ago, and we saw there were certain scenarios related to a wedge block.
That's where two people come together or three people come together. They basically go shoulder to shoulder and they form a wedge. We knew that that play looked bad, but we had no data behind it as to what the wedge was actually causing. And then came the data. Once we saw the wedge was creating all these problems, we went back and looked at the video, confirmed it, passed a rule that said you can't have a wedge.
Recent rule changes have resulted in a 30% reduction in kickoff concussions. It's part of an overall strategy the NFL has implemented through more than 50 rule changes to eliminate potentially dangerous tackles and reduce the risk of injury.
If you knew what we were looking at in the old days with what we're looking at today, it's a lot easier to work with, and it's a lot easier to convince people that whatever change you're going to have to make, there's a reason we're making the change, right? It's not just because somebody told us something or people think maybe this might work. It's because we have data and we can show them. If we change this, this is the result. If you look at our injury numbers and you look at what we've done as a league, you've seen progress, and that progress is by rule changes that were driven by data. So that's a good story.
But the innovation doesn't stop there. What the NFL's learned from its concussion reduction efforts is now being applied to reduce lower extremity injuries. This process looks at everything from the cleats players wear to the weather and uses a machine affectionately called the Beast.
Light this place up, let's go.
The NFL's work at reducing head injuries brought about a model that the league is now applying to any injury that happens on the field.
We're always trying to find ways to reduce overall injuries, and so we look at those hot spots. What are the areas where we really see those injuries occurring, and what can we learn about those injuries and ultimately, of course, prevent them?
The NFL uses radio frequency identification, or RFID tags, embedded within equipment to collect information on which piece of equipment players are wearing, including the component parts of each, from a helmet's chin strap to its face mask. As soon as the players step out of the locker room and onto the field, the tags are activated by radio waves that send data to a central digital inventory management system. This data is collected for every player, for every practice, and every game.
Hell yeah.
The sort of data that we're collecting now, whether it be through the engineers in breaking down some of the on-field injuries on a frame-by-frame basis and capturing it, whether it be some of the sensors in mouth guards or in shoulder pads that didn't exist 5 or 6 or 10 years ago.
An instrumented mouthpiece has a linear accelerometer and an angular accelerometer in it. It has onboard memory and it has some processing units in it. So it can basically measure the head impacts that happen to players. It can record that locally, and then when it gets back to its control case, it can download that data to the control case.
Many of these player mouth guards are fit using iTero's custom 3D scanning technology.
Family on 3. 1, 2, 3.
All of these new technologies and the mind-blowing amount of data they are collecting mean new opportunities for the league to look closely at injuries beyond concussions, including lower extremity injuries, which are some of the most complex injuries happening on field.
Can we replicate what we've done for concussion for all injuries? Lower extremity, it's our highest burden injury. It's the most missed time by a player, but it's a very complex injury. You have the footwear, you have what different types of surfaces that you're playing on, you have climate, contact versus non-contact of that injury. So it's this different problem set.
Just like the lab test that the NFL engineers came up with for helmets, they needed one for cleats and field surfaces too. Enter the Beast.
This is the Beast, the Biomechanical Elite Athlete Shoe Turf Tester. This is a machine that is designed to characterize the interaction between the cleat and the surface in playing fields such as this one. The purpose of this measurement is to verify whether excessive forces are being applied or transmitted to players on game-like situations.
At a demonstration at MetLife Stadium outside New York City this fall, the BioCore team collected data from the playing surface.
Really the key to it is that the loads that we're pushing down with and pulling with are taken from NFL athletes, so we know it's well associated with the game. And we're gonna pull away from those tests, how much force did the cleat and the surface hold together? If the cleat sticks, what does that mean as far as the forces that were transmitted through the body? And you'll see that the frame is kind of kneeling down onto the turf. The purpose for that is it gives us a really nice purchase. We know it's not going to move back and forth, and we can put down the sorts of loads that an NFL player would put down.
Executing, 3, 2, 1.
Best way to think about lower extremity injury is to think about lowering risk. If we can make the game 5% safer or 10% safer, it may not be easy to point to this injury was prevented, but we can look in aggregate and say that we have fewer players losing fewer days in a safer environment.
This is all new. It's cutting edge, it's innovative, but also it's an obligation for us to look for ways to improve the safety of the game using all available techniques and technologies. And so that's really what the goal here has been. It's exciting, but at the same time, it's maybe something that couldn't have been done just a few years ago. And so we really feel the opportunity to make some advances today.
Let's go, Town. Let's keep this train rolling.
When you're trying to protect an athlete, what you really want to describe are all the features around that athlete that could either keep them safe or put them at risk. What is going on in the game? What is the environment? Sort of what is the surface they're playing on? What is the equipment that they're wearing? All of those are going to impact the performance and safety of an athlete. And so what we can do is we can say, if we know the features of that athlete from each of those dimensions, how can we sort of optimize those to keep the player as safe as possible?
And that is the new frontier for the NFL's innovative use of data. It's called the digital athlete.
The digital athlete is a virtual representation of an NFL player using actual NFL games and data, and then analyzing it through artificial intelligence and machine learning to find better ways to predict and hopefully, over some period of time, prevent those injuries from occurring.
With the digital athlete, we can play an infinite number of games. We can have an infinite number of seasons, as opposed to simply the real one, which plays out in the real world. We can essentially run an infinite number of scenarios and simulate an infinite number of ideas.
We believe in partnering with the best in class. AWS is that. They have technologies that we obviously don't. And I think their approach to solving big problems is something that we found very attractive. They have a tremendous desire to be part of the solution. They have that kind of technology, whether it's machine learning, that will help us take the data that we have, that they can now analyze in so many different ways to produce results and solutions to us that we could only dream of many years ago.
With the digital athlete, the NFL is leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to make sense of all this data and to generate new insights that can keep improving all aspects of the game, from equipment to rehab, rules to coaching. The ultimate goal? Injury prediction and prevention.
The way machine learning works is you've got models, and those models have algorithms, and you can continuously have more and better data and run that data through more and better models.
We have all of the equipment scans, we have video, And then we have the performance tracking systems. We're putting all of those data streams together to create a historical perspective of the player. And then now we're leveraging computer simulation in order to generate injury reconstructions on field. And that allows us to really understand, why did this player get injured? And then identify the things that we could do to change that outcome.
If we're able to understand all the variables that do happen on our field and effectuate change through those variables, then we would be able to advance the health and safety of our players by preventing injuries, but also predicting.
Fans may never see a lot of aspects of the digital athlete, but the fact that we are helping players to understand the helmets that they should be wearing, and in the future, maybe the cleats that they should be wearing, and we're helping the NFL and the players to iterate on rule changes that are good for the game while being good for player safety, will keep players on the field more, which is good for everybody.
Go, go, go!
When we first started this, a lot of people were suspicious that we would change the game in a way that people wouldn't love, that it would change the game so dramatically and so fundamentally that it wouldn't be the game they all love. And I think we've proven that that's not the case. We believe, and we did believe at the beginning, that we could make our game safer and keep the excitement and fun of NFL football. But it's keeping our players safer. And that had to be the #1 objective. And we clearly have achieved that.